G'day again everyone, welcome back to the vlog. It is currently 6 p.m. on a Thursday evening and we are at Crown Casino in the car park. We're about to head into the poker room and play a bit of 2-5. Much like the last session, I have the goal this session of playing 6 hours straight, A-grade focused poker. I'm going to leave as soon as the 6 hours is up, unless the game's super juicy again. Hopefully it is, but if it's not, 6 hours, that's it. And then we'll see what our gameplay grade. I give myself aiming for that A. Didn't quite get there last time, so hopefully we can push up the skill level and play a bit better today. But without any further ado, let's hop into it and see if we can do that. Yo, so it is about midnight here at Crown Casino, wrapping up my 2-5 session, and I'm happy to say this time we did reach our hourly goal. We made 6 hours, then as soon as 6 hours we were up, we left the table. So in terms of that, done, set, we're cruising. But in terms of my actual gameplay grade and the hands I played, well, we're about to get into the hands I played soon, and let's see if we did play the A grade for all the 6 hours. So now that we're a little bit removed from the session, I think it's a good time to go over some of these hands. Didn't actually get too many hands in. I was a bit card dead throughout the session, unfortunately, but there are a few interesting ones, so let's hop straight into them. Okay, first hand, I'm under the gun with Ace Queen. I raise it up to 15, and then a passive player calls on the button, and the action gets back to the big blind. The less aggressive player, so he goes ahead and 3-bets it to 60, and the action's on me, and it's a classic. I don't mind any 3 of the options you have here. You could 4-bet for value against a loose aggressive player, but it's a bit too thin for me, so I decided to just call. Also, some merit to folding, but I think that's just a bit too conservative with a hand as strong as Ace Queen here. So I call, and then the button calls as well. We're 3 ways to a flop, which is Queen 9-3 with 2 spades. And then the big blind decides to c-bet 45, which is obviously a very small c-bet considering the pot's so large. And when the action's on me, obviously not going to fold Ace Queen. I think raising might be a bit of an overplay. I mean, I don't think that the big blind would want to c-bet an overpair so small on this board in particular. But having said that, don't want to blow him out of the pot if he does have a weaker hand like jacks or ace king, something like that. So I just call, and then the button calls as well. So we're still 3 ways to a turn, which is the 3 of diamonds. It's a repeat 3. Not really concerned about everyone having a 3 though, except for maybe the button. Anyway, the big blind checks it to me. So the action's on me, and this is actually a pretty awkward spot in terms of what size I want to bet. Obviously going to bet my ace queen for value here, but I have a few options. I can either bet small, something like 100, or I can just rip it all in for like a bit of an overbet of the pot. I'll be ripping about 380 into 300 pot, which is a bit of an overbet. It's a tough spot. I did ultimately decide to go all in. Obviously I don't want to bet small and give draws a really good price to draw. And also, if I do have to play a river with a really short stack depth, it's actually going to be kind of hard for my hand in particular. It's not a lot of good rivers for ace queen. I mean, any diamond, any spade is going to be bad. Kings are bad, eights are bad because they make straight. There's just a lot of bad river cards, so not super keen to see one, but I don't want to completely take that option of betting small off the table. I think it might be good and keep hands like pocket jacks, ace high, and I can also get value from nut flush draws as well. So it's definitely a legit option. I decide to rip it, however, and then the button folds and the big blind folds. So not sure if we lost value or not by ripping it all in on the turn there. And also I get to take down the first pot of the vlog, which is always cool. So the hijack in this hand, who was the passive player from the button in the previous hand, he opens to 20, then I'm in the big blind with ace king of spades. I go ahead and 3-bet it to 80, and then he calls. So we're heads up to a flop of ace jack 7 rainbow. The action's on me, and I have a pretty interesting decision here. I could either move all in to try and stack my opponent if they have a worse ace than mine. Obviously they only have 220 behind, so obviously that wouldn't be an unreasonable bet. But I actually prefer to check here And the reason I prefer checking here is if my opponent does have a worse ace, they're probably just going to move all in themselves, and also we've got to give them a chance to bluff if they want to do that. So I go ahead and check, and then they go ahead and bet 215, leaving themselves 5 behind. Bit of a strange bet, but whatever. Obviously going to rip it all in here with my ace king. I do, and the opponent sort of rolls his eyes and calls, and then the board runs out with bricks, and my opponent mucks their hand. So we take down the second pot of the vlog. So I'm in the hijack with king queen offsuit. I raise it up to 15, and I get no less than 3 callers. So we go 4 ways to a flop of jack 8-4. When the action checks to me, I just decide to check it here. Not really looking to try and bluff 3 people out of a relatively small pot, so I just check it, and then the action checks through. So we see a turn, which is the queen of diamonds, putting out backdoor diamonds, and then the action's on the small blind, and he actually leads out 40. So the action's on me, and I think I have a pretty easy decision to just call here. I think there actually is some merit to just folding. It's very likely that the small blind does have a strong hand than king-queen, but also a chance they're bluffing or semi-bluffing with a flush draw, so I'm not looking to fold just yet. I call, and then the cutoff folds and the button calls. So we have 3 ways, the small blind, myself, and the button to the river, and the river is the 9 of spades, bringing in the front door flush, and then the small blind decides to bet out 180, which is a pretty small overbet of the pot. But obviously with king-queen here, things are dicey. We lose to a lot on this board. There's straights, there's a flush there on the river. Obviously we're behind 2 pair and a set as well. We're even behind ace-queen, which I don't think he's going to overbet the river with ace-queen here, but we obviously lose to that as well. So it's a pretty easy decision for us to fold king-queen, in my opinion. And then the button folds as well, actually. So we give up that pot, but I think we made a good fold on that river. There is an early position limb, and then the same passive player that I played the ace-king hand against, he decides to raise it up to 20 again from the cutoff. And the actions on me in the small blind, I have pocket 10s, and even a pretty interesting pre-flop decision here between calling and 3-betting. I think folding is a bit too conservative, so I actually decided to mix in the 3-bet here. I think against the cutoff open, pocket 10s is going to be ahead most of the time, so I can actually 3-bet for value here. Plus, don't really like calling out a position as it is anyway, so I 3-bet it up to 80, then the limper folds and the cutoff calls. So we're heads up to a flop of 9-6 deuce with 2 clubs. The action's on me straight away, and I think this is a good spot to bet for value. Obviously there's not going to be a lot of good turns for us with pocket 10s here. There's a bunch of overcards that can come out, there's a club that can make a flush, and potentially this might be the only street we can get a value from a hand like ace-9, jack-9, 10-9, so I'm going to bet it up now. I go ahead and make it 100, and then the cutoff calls. So we do see a turn, and the turn is the ace of hearts. And this is a kind of interesting spot because my opponent only has about 200 behind, actually less than 200 behind, and there's already more than that in the pot. So I think my decision is between checking and going all in. And I actually much prefer to go all in here, just because if I do check, I don't think my opponent's going to bet a worse hand than pocket 10s here. Like, they can definitely have an ace. They could have slow played a set. I think it's unlikely though. And if they do have a worse hand than 10s, I think it's very likely that they're going to check. If they do have a flush draw or something like that, we really don't want them to see a free river card. Even if they have a hand like king queen, we don't want them to see a free river card. So I do decide to rip it all in, and then my opponent tanks a bit before folding. So I do think that's a bit of an interesting hand. Maybe shoving 10s on the turn is a bit of an overplay when my opponent easily could have floated with like ace-jack, ace-queen, ace-king. So let me guys know what you think about that turn shove. Is it too thin or is it the right move? Right, next hand, the low jack, who's a tight aggressive player, opens up to 15, and then the same villain I've been playing all these hands against tonight, he calls on the button, then the action's on me in the big blind, and I have 10-8 of clubs, and I decide to call. I think this is a very standard play, getting a price, closing the action pre-flop. Some merit to 3-betting, but against a tight aggressive player who's going to be playing tighter ranges, it's a bit too loose in my opinion, so I just call. We go 3 ways to a flop of king 8-4 rainbow with 1 club. So I check it to the pre-flop aggressor, and he actually checks, and the action's on the same villain I've been playing all night on the button, and he goes ahead and bets 30. Then the action's on me here, kind of an interesting spot with 10-8 here, but I do like calling, and the reason I like calling is I think it's somewhat possible my opponent on the button is betting a worse hand for protection than my middle pair here. But even if they're not, we do have middle pair, which is good. We can make 2 pairs on turns, we can make trips on turns, and we do have a little bit of extra incentive with the backdoor flush draw. So I throw in the call, and then the pre-flop aggressor folds. So we are heads up with the button to the turn, which is it's a banger of a turn. It is the 10 of diamonds, so we do make 2 pair. I go ahead and check it to the flop aggressor, and then he goes ahead and bets 60. And the action's on me here, and this is kind of an interesting decision, I think, with my 2 pair here. Obviously, my natural instinct is to raise for value. My opponent's representing a lot of strength here, and I want to get value from a king as much as I can, and I think the best way to do that is raising here. But I was a bit too timid in this spot, and I just called. I kind of regret that decision in retrospect. I think I can get money from a king here by raising. That's the best way to do it. And I can't be too concerned about king 10 and pocket 2s. Like, obviously I have to keep it in mind, but I think he's going to have like king queen, king jack way more often than in fact, he is going to have those hands way more often than he'll have the stronger 2 pairs are a set. So I think I missed a bit of value by not raising here. Regardless, I just call. So we do see a river, which is the 7 of spades. So the action's on me here, and I just follow my natural instinct and check to the aggressor. But I think even that's a mistake. Like, I just did it out of muscle memory, because you always check to the aggressor, right? But I think that's a mistake, because if I didn't raise the turn, I should just bet out for value here. I think it's very unlikely a passive player is going to continue to bet with a king jack, with a king queen. So when they do bet on the river, it's not like I can raise and really get called by a worse hand. So I actually think raising the turn's the right decision. But if I fail to do that, I can sort of start to correct that mistake by leading the river here, but I just mindlessly check out of instinct, and then my opponent does check back king queen. So very disappointed he lost that. He did have that hand, and we did lose a lot of value in this hand, I think. Alright, so I sort of mentioned at the start of this vlog how I was card dead for most of the session, and that was definitely true. In fact, I think after that 10-8 hand, I didn't play a hand for probably 2 hours, just because I was being dealt junk cards. So when I do finally get Queen 9 offsuit on the button, this is finally a good hand that I can actually play. So I raise it up for 15, and then the big blind decides to 3-bet to 30. So it's kind of crazy. You cannot play a hand for 2 hours and then you still get 3-bet, but obviously not going to fold Queen 9 offsuit, getting such a good price, even though it's not a great hand. So I do call, and we are heads up to a flop, and it's a banger of a flop. It is Queen 9-4 with 2 spades, so always fun to flop top 2 pair. And the 3-better pre-flop, he actually checks it to me, and I think I have a crystal clear value bet with my 2 pair on this flop. I go ahead and make it 35, and then the big blind calls. So we end up seeing a turn, which is the 5 of diamonds. Not the best turn card in the world. If my opponent did have an overpair, we've now been counterfeit. They go ahead and check it to us. I think even though that's the case, we can't get value from that hand anymore. I still want to bet for value here. You could potentially get called by flush draws. If my opponent wants to do a hero call with a hand like pocket jacks, pocket tens, something like that, we can still get value from that as well. So I go ahead and bet 50, and then they call. So we end up going heads up to a river, and the river is the 7 of spades, which brings in the front door flush draw. And then my opponent leads out for 70. So obviously this is a very small bet, but I'm kind of tempted to just fold here, just because if my opponent is playing a overpair in this kind of weird way, we got counterfeit on the turn, so we do lose to that. But also, obviously, the front door flush got in, and they could definitely, legitimately play a flush in this fashion. So there's actually a lot of stuff we lose to. If I think about what my opponent's bluffing with, it'd have to be like a pocket jacks or a pocket tens that is turning a pair into a bluff, which isn't impossible. I actually think it'd be a good move by the villain, but you just don't see that too often at 2-5. So I actually think there is some merit to folding top 2 pair here. Having said that though, we are getting a great price, and we don't need to have the best hand very often at all, so I do throw in the call. And then my opponent shows pocket queens. So actually they flopped top set and then turned the full house. So we were actually lucky to not get stacks in much earlier, because we would have been stacked. So even though I lost the hand, I'm pretty grateful to not get stacked in this hand. So believe it or not, after 6 hours, those are all the interesting hands I played. Most other hands, either I just folded pre-flop, or I took it down with a C-bet, or I check folded the flop. So we didn't play many interesting hands in the session, unfortunately, but there was a few interesting ones in there for you guys, and I hope you appreciated them. I ended up buying in for 500 and cashing out for 761, so pretty nice profit on the session, and I can't complain for 6 hours work. But in terms of the gameplay grade, we were looking for an A today for the 6 hours, and unfortunately I'm going to give my gameplay grade a B this session. I did like a lot of the decisions I made throughout the course of the session. Having said that though, there's a few giant mistakes leaping out at me. I think I lost a lot of value with the 10-8 hand where I turned to pair. I definitely think if I raise the turn, my opponent's going to call at least one bet with King Queen. So if I check raise to 200, there's $140 that I'm just missing out on by not raising, and I'm not sure what they would have done when I went all in the river, but they're passive opponents, so I might have even had the potential to stack them that I just squandered by not check raising the turn. I didn't even try to correct the mistake by leading the river. I just sort of I lost focus for a bit and just slipped into muscle memory and what I instinctually always do, which I think is bad also. So obviously I didn't, punt off an entire stack or make a really bad call, but they're not the only ways you can make mistakes in poker. You also need to try and get maximum value when you have the opportunities to do so, and I'm very disappointed in myself for missing that opportunity in this session, so definitely can't go with a super high grade, but in general, I like most of the plays I made, so I think a B feels about right. So obviously there's a bit of frustration that we can't achieve this goal of 6 hours of A-grade play, but I will say I do take solace in the fact that I have improved from the last vlog where I gave myself a C+, and I got a B this time, so hopefully it's going up in the right direction and we can get an A out to you guys soon before the Aussie Millions comes. That's going to wrap up the vlog for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching, I really appreciate it. Make sure you follow me on Instagram @LeeBets for those interactive hand histories. And make sure you subscribe to the channel. Aussie Millions coming up soon. That's going to be so much fun, and I can't wait to share those vlogs with you guys. For now, I'm out of here. Peace.